quite as tall as Elvis. Okay. Well, it's a beautiful day. I feel like today is a good day for a new beginning. How about you? Yesterday we had a lot of wind, and wind, it just blows out all the cobwebs, all the dust that's in the corners, and it just really brings in a fresh spirit. So I think that we could really appreciate that wind last night, that it gives us this new start. So my topic is finding joy in relationships. Do you like this picture? This is Colorado. The most beautiful place in Colorado, maybe. The Maroon Bell is up near Aspen. So many of you may know that one of the things I've been involved with recently is to serve as a matching supporter for some young couples. So that means that helping young men and women find each other and build an eternal relationship through the marriage blessing. And sometimes with couples that I helped introduce and then they receive the marriage blessing, I'd like to follow up with them and just make sure everything's going well with their family and so forth and so on. And one couple that I was supporting, or that I have been supporting, they were having some problems with communication. They were having, some misunderstandings, and the wife was feeling kind of unappreciated and unloved. The husband was feeling kind of criticized and maybe misunderstood, and I think that's not uncommon. In fact, that may happen at times in all relationships. But with this particular couple, we started meeting once every couple weeks, and one thing I recommended them was to keep an appreciation journal. So many times we might appreciate something about our spouse or our kids for that matter, or our parents, but we don't necessarily tell them. We don't verbalize it. We just, in our heart, we think, oh, that my husband or my wife has this good quality, but we don't say anything, and the other person may not think that we appreciate them at all. So what they did was they had this, binder, and then every day the husband writes down one thing he appreciates about his wife, and the wife writes down one thing she appreciates about her husband. And so they've been doing this continually for months now. And even I was surprised how much this actually helped. It really helped them. It really helped the wife to feel appreciated, because she could go and read that journal every day and say, oh, my husband actually does have good thoughts about me. He actually does appreciate some things about me. And I think it was also helpful also for the husband to even put his mind to think about what he appreciated about his wife. Because he tends to get busy and doesn't focus on that. And also, it was nice for him to see that his wife appreciated him and didn't just have complaints about him. So I think that, we all can learn from this. It helped them, but how much do we also do this in our own, marriage, in our own family, with our friends, with other brothers and sisters? I think we can all learn from this to instead of focusing on the complaint we have, the thing we don't like, the thing that bugs us, to take time to really focus on what we actually admire about that person, what that person has that's valuable, not only to us, but to the community and even to God. So I got some quote. I have a quote from our founders about this. So let's see if this works. Oh yeah, it does. Okay. I'll just read it. In my original state, when I possess heart, achievements of heart and joy automatically come about. Just as we want to have a healthy body, our original mind seeks a joyful heart. Everyone's original nature wants to become a joyful self, a peaceful self, and an artistic self. Our heart always seeks to possess our joyful selves. Then how can we attain a artistically joyful self? Okay. It goes on. First, I must know that a being called me is a being with relationships, and I must create joy within relationships. Therefore, if you keep these relationships well and fulfill your responsibilities, you can always produce joy and go to the path of seeking original nature. However, if you do not form relationships well and do not fulfill your responsibilities, you end up going on a path of misery. In order to preserve your heart, you have to form relationships well. If I do not form relationships well, there will be total darkness in my life, in my heart. And I think we all know what this means. You know, when we have a conflict in an important relationship, or even in any relationship, even if we have a conflict with somebody we just ran into on the street, you know, then do we feel joyful? No, we feel darkness in our heart. We're struggling. We're wondering why this is happening to me, you know, why things can't go better. If everyone lives for the sake of others with a sincere heart, you experience what it means to be true and you gain strength. However, when we look at our own lives, we fail to do that. We often discriminate depending on the other person and ignore them. This is where all mankind becomes false. When you live with standards that depend on the other person and the environment, while calculating your advantages, you come to discriminate. We must know ourselves well. We must ask ourselves if we really treat others as we would ourselves. So I think this points out or highlights what the problem is with criticizing others. The fact is that when I'm criticizing someone else, this is actually coming from a self-centered point of view. I'm seeing the other person and they're not doing what I want them to do. They're not acting the way I want them to, and they're making me feel uncomfortable, or maybe they're even blaming me for something. All of that is seeing what's going on around me in terms of myself. And even though I'm saying, you know, I said this is self-centered, so you would think, well, if it's self-centered, it should be good for the self, because, you know, centering things on myself, I should feel happy. But actually, it's the opposite of that. You know, taking the relationship through a lens of myself actually is self-destructive. Why? Because it prevents us from finding joy in relationships. It prevents us from having fulfilling relationships that would actually make our life so much better. You know, so we're actually not even acting in our own self-interest because we're destroying the very thing which is the foundation of our happiness. So, you know, we have to find the way to create this joy in our relationship, to find the point of view where we are having harmonious relationships and where we can take a new approach to our relationship with others. So you may know that I studied accounting several years ago, and when you're studying accounting, you always have to take ethics classes. They know very well that accountants are the main embezzlers and fraudsters and thieves out there in this world. So they make sure that every year anyone studying accounting has to take an ethics course. And the ethics courses they give, they talk about, you know, very high level ethics. They really don't have anything to do with accounting, and they rarely get into the nitty-gritty of what you might actually encounter that might tempt you to do something illegal. But at any rate, you get exposed to some ethical ideas that are very all-encompassing. And thing I learned in these courses that really stuck with me was part of what's called the categorical imperative of Immanuel Kant, who was a German philosopher way back in the 1700s. And Kant always focused on duty, but I think this can also be taken from a point of view of heart. So here's a quote. "So act that you use humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, and never merely as a means." And I think that this means, to me, what this means is we can't just use people to satisfy what we need, what we want. At the same time, we have to understand that that is a person in their own right, that that person has value that's unique and irreplaceable. And so they're not just there to do what I need them to do. They're not there just for the sake of me, but they have a larger existence. And in Divine Principle, which is the teaching of our founders, we would say this was seeing others from God's point of view. We would say, because God loves everybody, and he sees the value of each person and deeply loves each one, that from his point of view, that person has incredible value. Whereas if I just see from my own point of view, I might think, what is that person to me? That person actually has no value to me because they cannot provide me with anything to make my life better. But that means that, for example, we got kids in school and there's a teacher. The teacher isn't just there to teach my kids. And if they're not teaching my kids well, I'm mad at them, I criticize them. But that teacher is a person who is dedicating their life to raising the youth of our nation. Even the person who picks up my trash once a week, or more if, I don't know how many times you get your trash picked up, but even the person that picks up my trash, that's a person who is dedicating himself to keeping my community clean. He's not just the person who knocked over my trash can by mistake, So we have to see the other person from the point of view of value that is an eternal value, that is a value from God. So sometimes in the past months or year or so, sometimes I had coffee with Julie here. And whenever we go to get coffee, Julie always has something nice to say to the person who's serving the coffee. And she asks them about their day, or she tries to do something to make their day brighter. She takes an interest in them, and I'm always amazed by that. Because when I go to get coffee, I just think, give me my coffee. I don't take the slightest bit of interest in the person. And I think to myself, I should be more like Julie. I should really take an interest in people and realize that they're not just there to serve me the coffee. They're a person with hopes, dreams, and a past and a future and all those things. So I feel like, I hope that I can become more like that kind of person. That's what I would like to see myself being. And so I think that is kind of what we mean when we say use people as not just as a means, but as an end in themselves. So I have another quote. Well, there's lots of quotes that have to do with this topic. There we go. My existence itself absolutely belongs to God. When we realize this, we see that not even 1% of ourselves belongs to us. Not only that, but all the people I'm related to also belong to God. All my relationships with them belong to God. They're precious people. From that point of view, how can we discriminate against others? Can you discriminate? Discrimination is like murder. You must not discriminate. A husband is a husband from heaven, and a wife is a wife from heaven. Even if the other person is lacking, you should feel sorry for them. Even though all of humanity regarded True Father as an enemy, he was the one who valued humanity more than his children. So we have to as this points out, we also belong to God. We also have to value ourselves as a being that comes from God. It's hard to value others if we don't value ourselves. But valuing ourselves and realizing that God loves us means also at the same time recognizing that God loves that other person, even though that's the person that annoys me the most, or, pushes all my buttons, or whatever, really gets me upset. Several years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I think, my mother passed away. And at the time of my mother's passing, I went back home, which is Philadelphia, and I was helping, arrange things with my brothers. I have 2 brothers over there. And from the moment I got off the plane, my younger brother just started criticizing me, and more or less attacking me, actually. It's like I couldn't do anything right. And I didn't know what to think. I really wondered, where is this coming from? Of course, some people, act when they lose somebody close to them, they may act in ways that are kind of irrational. I felt it was irrational. And of course, I was offended by it, but I just kind of took it all in. And, I asked my older brother, does anything that he's saying make any sense to you? I mean, he was pulling up things that seemed to come out of thin air. But I went back, and since my brother was the executor of my mother's estate, there was more give and take about all these things, and this went on for quite a few months, and I kept thinking, why is this happening? Why is he doing this? And I really was trying to understand. Now, there was a chance at that time that I could have just said, he's a jerk, I don't want anything more to do with him. I could have broken off the relationship, but that's not what I wanted, because he's my brother, and he's always going to be my brother, and I didn't really want to have a bad relationship with him. And so I really thought about it for quite a long time. And it took me a long time, but afterwards I realized that whenever my mother had some issue or she needed something done, she would call my brother, because he lived in Pennsylvania, but it was actually 4 hours drive from where my mom was. But he would drive down, he would take care of it. And he took care of her finances and all those things. So he actually had put a lot of effort into taking care of her. And my other brother, who just lived about half an hour away, he just didn't take action, because he's just not that person who takes that kind of action. And I was way away in here in Denver, and I probably, my thinking was, well, Jeff is there, so he should do it, I'm over here, and I'm busy with all this church work and stuff. So I really didn't see what he had been investing, And I think he felt unappreciated. He felt that he had made all that effort, and my older brother and I had never really valued it or appreciated it, or realizing that it was a sacrifice for him. And so I sent an email to him, and I copied my older brother. And I told him, I said, Jeff has done all this, effort to help our mom over the years, and I think we really owe him a debt of gratitude, and I really appreciate it. And that's all. He never responded to the email, but our relationship got better. It's not a problem anymore. And so I realized that, there's so many times that you can overlook what someone else is doing, and then you blame them when they accuse you. But actually, you haven't really done your part by putting yourself into their shoes and realizing, what they have done and what they deserve to be recognized for, and what might mean a lot to them to be recognized for. So the last Sunday, I was sitting next to Marjorie here, which I tend to sit next to her, and we were sharing something about grandchildren, And something came up about her daughter-in-law. And she said, "Oh, she's such a lovely person." She made that comment. "My daughter-in-law is such a lovely person." And I thought, oh, if everybody could just think about like that, about their daughter-in-law, or their mother-in-law, or their kids, or whatever, we'd have so much more joyful relationships, But we tend to think about the one thing about our daughter-in-law that we don't like, or the one thing about, our kids that bugs us, or the one thing about our parents that bugs us, or whatever. We tend to focus on that. And that's why we're not finding that joy often. No, maybe you are, but I find myself, I really need to develop in this respect. A few weeks ago, or maybe it was even last week, I don't know if you know Myrna Lepre. She has a podcast called A Deeper Connection, and sometimes she does it with Crescentia, but recently they did one and they interviewed Justin Okamoto, who's the pastor in the Belvedere Church. And he was sharing about an experience he had with his parents. And he was feeling distant from his parents. And he got up the courage to talk to them about it. And he talked to his dad, and then he talked to his mom. And as a result of that discussion or that interaction, the parents decided on Thanksgiving of, I guess, last year, that they usually go around and have the kids tell what they're grateful for. But this year, they went around and they told what they're grateful for each of their kids. And this exercise that they did actually had a big impact on him. It really helped him restore that closeness that he wanted to have with his parents. And it was just a matter of them expressing, I'm sure they appreciated him all the time. I mean, but they didn't express it. And the fact that they could go on and individually tell each of their kids what they really valued about them and things like that, it really made an impact and helped them to have that joyful relationship again. So I'm going to read one more quote. Among human beings' portion of responsibility, I shouldn't have said one more quote because there's still one more after this. Among human beings' portion of responsibility, which is the most precious? It is a portion of responsibility that values relationships as if they were life. This is because the realization of true love can only be achieved through relationships. Love is a world you can never experience alone. And since the realization of love must be made through the relationship with the other person, you must value everything related to you, but to this person, more than your own life. So the relationships in our life aren't just something that we're responsible for, something that we have to take care of, but it's the very core of our happiness here and even eternally. Those relationships are something that we can't just ignore or put up to the side, but we have to really make effort as if they were the very core of our life. So I think that making a new start means that actually it's not easy to change your point of view. I'm not going to tell you, yeah, you just got to think differently and then everything's going to work out great. Actually to change your point of view to think of the other person, to not put yourself in the center, to not take offense when somebody criticizes you, to not get defensive, all that, it actually takes a lot of going inside myself and really seeking God's help and really realizing that there's something I want to change here. And really determining that we're going to change ourselves. So it does take a tremendous effort, and it's not ever going to happen unless we put our heart into it. But if we do put our heart into it, I think the results we find will be very significant. So now I have one final quote. If I am a person who walks the path of original nature, I must grab hold of my own fallen nature and weep whenever I clash with others. God sees as righteous a person who has a heart that feels sorry for the other person's faults as if they were their own. If we don't struggle in this way, we cannot be resurrected. There are many people who mistakenly believe that they're doing God's work while leaving their fallen nature as it is. To live harmoniously in interpersonal relationships without clashing is God's work. Building a church, diligently going around declaring that the Lord has come, and going to church to serve are, of course, God's work. But that comes second. We must not lose our original nature and misunderstand that it is God's work to proclaim his work eternally. Everything has to do with self-growth. So here I feel it's saying that the real work that's God's work is creating ourselves as a person who loves as God loves. It's not some external thing, although there's many external things we have to do all the time. But that is like our main purpose, our main job is to develop ourselves to become the person that truly loves others and finds joy in relationship. This is the kind of person that will live in heaven on earth with joyful relationships and live in heaven eternally. So that's the person that we're meant to be. A citizen of the kingdom of heaven is simply a person who loves others as God loves them. So that's the message, and please join me in prayer. Yeah. Dear Heavenly Parent, we thank you. We thank you for this beautiful morning. We thank you for brothers and sisters gathered together here to attend you, to love you. I really pray that we can truly bind together ourselves in love with each and every brother and sister here. I really pray we can have joy and love in our husband-wife relationships, in our parent-children relationships, in our brother and sister relationships, and in all relationships of people of this world, and truly become a beacon where people can find that love that they are missing in their own lives. Pray that we can embody that in our lives and truly live this principle. I thank you and offer you this time in the name of Peggy of the Yujiri family, a blessed central family, Jew. Thank you.